In this lecture, we're going to be looking at unemployment and inflation. The syllabus includes looking at what employment and unemployment are. We're also going to be taking a look at what full employment is and how it relates to unemployment. And lastly, we're going to be looking at inflation and deflation. Let's start off with employment and unemployment. So why is unemployment actually a problem? We hear it all the time. Unemployment rates are high, but why is that actually a bad thing? Well, unemployment means that someone has lost their job, and to lose their job means that they've also lost their income. And when someone loses their income, it leads to somewhat of a domino effect. And this domino effect goes as follows. A loss in income results in a loss of production, which then results in a loss of consumption, which results in a loss of investment, which then causes lower standards of living in the present and the future. We also have the loss of human capital, and human capital is simply the skills, the knowledge, and the experience possessed by an individual. And prolonged exposure to unemployment actually damages a person's job prospects because they lose human capital. Let's take a look at some definitions before moving on to some labor market indicators. So the working age population is defined as the total number of people aged 15 years and over. The labor force, which is a part of this working age population, is simply the members that are either employed or unemployed. Now, the number of people in the labor force is equal to the number of people employed plus the number of people unemployed. To be employed, a person must have either a full-time or a part-time job. To be unemployed, there are a couple of conditions that must be satisfied. So first of all, a person must be available for work, and they must satisfy one of the following three criteria. They could either be on temporary layoff with an expectation of recall, and this recall could be at any point in time. They could be without work, but has looked for work in the past 4 weeks, and that's a key part of the definition, 4 weeks. Or they have a new job, and they're going to be starting it within 4 weeks. And those are the criteria. One of the last three, and the first one that I mentioned at the beginning, that must be met. You could also not be in the labor force at all, and that's simply just people of working age who are not employed or unemployed. The first labor market indicator that we're going to look at is the unemployment rate. You hear this one all the time. The unemployment rate is simply the percentage of people in the labor force who are unemployed, and this indicates the extent to which people want to find jobs but can't find them. Now, the unemployment rate is calculated as the number of people unemployed divided by the labor force multiplied by 100. Let's take a look at this example here. So a country has a working age population of 22 million, 16 million of these people are employed, 2 million are unemployed, and 1 million of the employed are working part-time, half of whom wish to work full-time. So what is the unemployment rate? There are a lot of variables here, so let's only take into account the ones that we actually need to find the unemployment rate, which is the number of people unemployed and the labor force. So the number of people employed is 16 million. The number of people unemployed is 2 million. We're not explicitly given the labor force here, but we can calculate that. But let's start off with the unemployment rate. The number of people unemployed is given to us, 2 million. Simple as that. But the labor force isn't given to us. But if you remember, we do know that the labor force is equal to the number of people employed plus the number of people unemployed. And so both of those values are actually given to us. So we have 16 million people that are employed plus 2 million people that are unemployed. And that gives us our labor force of 18 million people. Now, to calculate the unemployment rate, we're just going to plug it into the equation. We have 2 million people that are unemployed divided by 18 million people that are employed plus unemployed, which is the labor force, and that gives us our unemployment rate of 11.1%. Our next labor market indicator is the involuntary part-time rate. And the involuntary part-time rate is simply the percentage of people in the labor force who work part-time jobs but want full-time jobs. And this is calculated as the number of involuntary part-time workers divided by the labor force multiplied by 100. Let's take a look at an example. So we have the same numbers from last time. We're given all the same values, but this time we need the number of involuntary part-time workers and the labor force. So the number of involuntary part-time workers is simply 0.5 million. And if you notice, you might think, oh, isn't it 1 million? Because we have 1 million people that are employed, working part time. But if you read the question closely, it says half of these people wish to work full time. So the other half are actually okay with working part time. So it's only 0.5 million people or 500,000 people that are actually working part time and want to work full time. So these are the only people counted as the involuntary part time workers. And we also have the labor force, which is 18 million. It's the same way of calculation as we did for the last example, and it's 18 million. Now all we need to do is just plug it into the equation. We have 0.5 million divided by 18 million multiplied by 100%, and that gives us 2.8%. Now I want to make a distinction here, because we have 0.5 million, but we can also say 500,000. What we want to do is we want to make sure that the units in both the numerator and the denominator are kept constant, just so that we get the right value. Let's move on to the next labor market indicator, and this is the labor force participation rate. And this is simply defined as the percentage of working age population who are members of the labor force. And this is just calculated by simply dividing the labor force by the working age population and multiplying it by 100. Let's use the same example here, but let's take out the stuff that we don't need. So to calculate the labor force, we already know we take 16 million that are employed plus the 2 million that are unemployed. We add them together and we get 18 million. And the working age population is actually also just given to us as 22 million. Now we're going to take those two values, we're going to take the labor force, we're going to divide that by the working age population, so that's 18 million divided by 22 million, and we're going to multiply that by 100. And that'll give us our labor force participation rate of 81.8%. Simple. Now, the next one that we're going to be looking at is the employment to population ratio. And this is simply the percentage of people working age who have jobs. And this is an indicator of the availability of the jobs and the ability to match skills of people to jobs. And this is simply calculated as the number of people employed divided by the working age population multiplied by 100. Let's look at the same example again. Oh, and keep in mind that this particular ratio fluctuates with the business cycle. It falls during a recession and rises in an expansion. But let's go back to the example. And let's take out the stuff that we don't need. So the working age population is 22 million, and the employed is 16 million. So we have the employed of 16 million, and we have the working age population of 22 million. Now we're simply going to plug that into the equation again. We get 16 million divided by 22 million times 100 gives us 72.7%, and that is our employment to population ratio. There are a couple other definitions of unemployment which are not actually considered in the official definition of unemployment, and that is one of them is discouraged workers. A discouraged worker is a person who is either currently neither looking for work, nor he's neither working nor looking for work, but has indicated that they actually want a job, is available for work, and has actually looked for work in the recent past, but has stopped due to repeated failure. The official definition does not include discouraged searchers because they haven't actually made the effort to find jobs in the past 4 weeks. We also have long-term future starts, and this is somebody with a job that starts more than 4 weeks in the future, and they're just classified as not in the labor force. But this is, in some way, if you think about it, they are kind of unemployed. They want to work, but they don't have a job. Then we also have involuntary part-time workers. These are part-time workers who want a full job and can't find them, but they're not actually counted in the official statistics of unemployment.